Hey America, Brian Ward here. Listen, on July the 3rd, 2025, I filed a lawsuit in federal court against Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in his official capacity as the Secretary of the HHS agency, as well as Marty McCary as the FDA Commissioner. The reason why is that in January of 2024, Biden's FDA promulgated a new regulation under 21 CFR 50.22 that permits public and private entities acting on behalf of a sponsor to conduct clinical investigations, which is equivalent to medical experimentation, on your body without asking for your permission or even informing you that you're being involved in such an experiment before, during, or after the study. Now, the experiment can be one of two things. It can be a primary research activity or a secondary research activity. Primary is when they involve you directly with a drug, biologic, or device to study how that article, as they call it, impacts the structure of your human anatomy. Secondary research is when they take blood from your arm for one purpose. So say you go into the doctor, you're not feeling well, and they take your blood, but they send that blood, biospecimen, off to a clinical lab where they will conduct experiments on that blood that has nothing to do for the purpose of which it was drawn. That's called secondary research. And it has been the public health policy of the United States government, because of our Constitution, that anytime you are involved in a clinical investigation or secondary research with your biospecimens, that the sponsor of the investigation shall obtain your legally effective informed consent. Now, that legally effective informed consent is in a quote. It's a phrase in law. And it is a standard that is specific and unique to the biomedical behavioral research industry. And here's what it means. When the sponsor of the investigation when they ask you if you would like to participate, they must ask you under a legally approved environment. That environment must ensure that you're not under outside pressure to participate, such as coercion, undue influence, or unjustifiable pressures. And they must inform you that you will not incur a penalty or lose a benefit to which you are otherwise entitled if you refuse such participation. Now, this standard goes way back to 1974 when Congress passed the National Research Act that stemmed from when Senator Edward Kennedy held hearings in the Senate of medical research abuses by the executive branch. We know of one called the Tuskegee experiment, but there were thousands of those. So Congress passed the National Research Act in 1974, promulgated this regulation called the Legally Effective Informed Consent Standard, and it has been the public health policy since that time to protect your rights, because there are fundamental rights implicated when you are covertly involved in a biomedical medical experimentation outside of your legally effective informed consent rights. So the FDA in 2024 promulgated a regulation that specifically allows these clinical investigators to incorporate your person, your body, your biospecimens, your biometric data and behavioral metrics into clinical investigations without your knowledge or your consent. So what's the history behind this, and what does it mean for us, and why should it scare you to the very core of your being? Because of this. In 2016, Congress passed the Cures Act, and in it had a small paragraph asking the FDA to promulgate regulations that would allow exempt research activities from the informed consent standard, while at the same time protecting your rights, safety, and health. Now listen, in the past, there have always been exempt research activities, but those activities have always involved conditions where there were retrospective studies, for example, and your identifiable private information was already known in the public domain. And those retrospective studies primarily tended to study the effectiveness of a federal program or federal benefits. But as soon as your identifiable private information, IPI, was known or could be known through multiple sources of data, then the sponsor of the research activity was required by law to obtain your legally effective informed consent. So what the FDA did is that in 2018, they proposed a new rule where they were going to consider some of these exempt research activities. But listen to this. Here's the bait and switch. They specifically stated that under no conditions were they considering a regulation that would allow exempt research involving humans with unapproved drugs, biologic, and devices. I'm paraphrasing here, but I want to put it in layman's terms for you. Involving these unapproved medical products if your IPI was known. But they said, listen to this bait and switch, they said, we want to accept comments for the purpose of discussion. So they were not proposing a new rule to the American public at that time. You fast forward to January of 2024, lo and behold, 6 years after people gave comments and no one's even discussed it, the FDA comes out with a regulation under 50.22 C, I believe it is, where they specifically allow sponsors of these investigations to conduct experiments on you when your IPI is known. Now, what does this actually mean for us as America right now? Well, specifically, the FDA has claimed ownership of our personhoods, our agency. They have claimed us as chattel, that we are property of the FDA, that they have authority to allow other public and private entities to conduct medical experimentation on our bodies without our consent at our expense for their profit. You see, they're conducting these experiments for the purpose of having drugs, biologics, and devices approved by the FDA that they could go sell into the marketplace for the benefit of their shareholders at our expense. Listen, this violates the Constitution 1,000 ways from Sunday. So first of all, the FDA is claiming ownership of the human race, and that's just as gross of abuse of a power as you could possibly imagine. Now, when they were promulgating these regulations, listen to this. One of the comments was from the people who submitted a comment, said, listen, you just can't involve people in secret medical experimentation without their informed consent. You're violating several provisions of the Constitution. And here's what the FDA said. And again, I'm paraphrasing here because there's a lot of content in here. And I'm going to give you a link to the lawsuit so that you can go read it verbatim. But the FDA said, listen, we understand that there are a lot of reasons why someone may refuse participation in a clinical study. They may not like the person conducting the study. They may not like the organization. They may not like the study itself. But when it comes to target populations, we're going to circle back to that in a moment. It is burdensome to the clinical investigator, listen to this, to determine whether or not a person would refuse participation based on those factors. So under that condition, we are granting them authority to bypass the legally effective informed consent rights of the American people. This is an egregious abuse of power by the FDA. So what does this clinical investigation permits? Listen to this. Right now, if Mayor Bass wanted to coordinate with a clinical investigator or a sponsor of the investigation, she could create a target population of her public employees where the sponsor could come in unknowingly to those employees and conduct biomedical experiments on their persons, their biospecimens, etc., without their knowledge. Because for the first time in history, you can now attach the IPI of the individual's information to that research data. You can permanently store that information and share it with unknown persons for unknown reasons for unknown length of time. Now, here's the thing. The regulation specifically states that this can only involve research activities that involve minimal risk activities. Now, what is minimal risk? In this definition, it only involves physical minimal risk, which means activities that are injuries that you may incur on a daily life, paper cuts, bruises. So an invasive procedure could be drawing blood from you, right? And the FDA said that's fine. Now, forget the fact that if it was outside of the research context, if someone cut you, bruised you, burned you, any of those factors, that would be a torturous interference in your life, that you would have a right to go and sue them for that injury. But here the FDA says, just have at it. However, because we now know the IPI of the individual, minimal risk involves far more than just minimal risk to the physical body. It now involves minimal risk to the person's constitutional rights. For example, many of the components used in the medical research industry contain cell lines from porcine, pig. And we know that the Jews and the Muslims, they have a strong religious conviction that they cannot inject pig into their person. So now you have a condition where an employee could sue their employer for terminating them because they would not accommodate their religious beliefs involving a drug that contains pig tissue. But here, the FDA is authorizing the employer, who could be acting on behalf of the sponsor, to bypass your religious convictions altogether by not informing you that they're involving you with the products to begin with. Secondly, a lot of Christians are against products that are derived from fetal cell lines. The same conditions exist there. So now we have a minimal risk protocol here that involves a fundamental constitutional right to exercise one religious beliefs freely without an undue burden from the government. And the government is just stripping that away from us. Additionally, we have due process rights. Imagine for a moment that you are injured from the research activity. However, the investigator is not required to inform you that you're participating in the activity until he or she deems it is practicable for them to inform you. Well, if they know that you're injured from their research activity, do you honestly believe they'll ever find a day that it's actually practicable for them to inform you? Of course not. But now your Fifth Amendment due process rights to sue for that injury has been deprived from you because you don't know where the injury derived from. Additionally, this violates the 13th Amendment against involuntary servitude. Imagine you go to your doctor's office. You're sick, they draw blood, and the doctor has you to run on a treadmill. You think you're running on a treadmill because he is testing you for your sickness. No, he's conducting a biomedical experiment on you, of which he is being paid to do that on behalf of the sponsor. So now you are giving labor to a pharmaceutical company through your doctor who's conducting this clinical experiment on you, and they are using what's called, the Supreme Court calls, the process of law to involve you in unwanted labors against your will. That's the quintessential definition of involuntary servitude that's prohibited by the 13th Amendment. There's a lot of problems with this regulation. So I sued in federal court on July the 3rd to have the regulation vacated. My concern is that because it allows mass population clinical investigations now. So Mayor Bass of Los Angeles, if she wanted to conduct a clinical experiment on a target population, which target population could be the city employees, she could coordinate with a sponsor of investigation and make that happen. You have a newborn born in a hospital. The hospital can draw blood and send part of that blood off now to a lab to have the DNA extracted and sequenced and permanently attached to your newborn's private medical file that you know nothing of. Your children can go to school and they can extract biometric data. Biometric data could be a hair follicle, the iris design, your DNA. It could be your voice print. It could be your fingerprint. It could be how they walk, how they type on the keyboard. Those are called behavioral metrics. And so now we have a mechanism, a process of law in place through the FDA, who's promising all kinds of transparency right now, but this is the most non-transparent protocol out there in America, where they can conduct these experiments, extract our biospecimens, which violates our property rights, because if your biospecimen is not given, it is your property, according to the Supreme Court, to dispose of how you desire. But the FDA has said, listen, the human race, they are chattel. They are property of the FDA. We authorize you, Pfizer, to go and extract biospecimens from these humans and conduct the experiments however you want to. It gets a lot worse when you understand how this could be applied to artificial intelligence and the extraction of biometric data from the human race. It becomes very scary. So I have sued to have this regulation, and the rule itself vacated. It involves far more than what I just told you about. If you would like to read the brief, the complaint, you can go to covidpenalty.com and read it there. And you can also follow it. I will be giving updates there and on my X account and other locations. And here's what I'm asking of you, America. I'm asking for two things specifically. Number one, will you share this information with the American people? Every single member of Congress should know what's going on in America right now. Every single person in your neighborhood, in your city, should understand that they could be under a clinical investigation right now and not even know it. We have all incurred concrete injury because we have all been stripped of our right now to be able to refuse covert clinical investigations. We no longer have the fundamental right, according to the FDA under Marty McCary, to be able to refuse these secret, clandestine medical experimentations on our bodies, or our biospecimens, or when they want to extract our biometric data. So we have incurred injury, and we all are suffering because of this. So I'm asking you to share this with the nation so that the nation will learn the truth of what's taken place. Number two, I took a tremendous leap of faith in filing this lawsuit. I am not an attorney. However, I have specific and I have a lot of knowledge in the biometric and the biomedical research industry, and I decided to take this leap of faith and file this lawsuit myself. I already spent 2 months learning how to file the lawsuit, and the reason I chose to file the lawsuit is, number one, it would cost 6 figures to hire an attorney to do this. Number two, when it comes to oral arguments, I don't know of an attorney who could give the oral arguments effectively in a court of law. And so I have the depth of knowledge involving the wide range of regulations that are implicated and the laws, the treaties, the executive agreements, and the Supreme Court precedent involving this regulation, this rule, and I'll know how to effectively argue it should the current administration, should Marty McCary desire with the DOJ to actually fight to keep this regulation in place. But they have an uphill battle that they will not be able to win because it just violates the Constitution 1,000 ways from Sunday. I'm asking you to do something that's very important for the successful outcome of this case, and that is financially support my efforts. You know, I got involved in this because in 2022, some military officers came and asked me to look into the mandates. I did. That summer, their spouses who were surgeons and doctors in the civilian field asked me to look at their mandates because I have a gift for solving complex problems. I retain about 95% of what I read, and my mind makes connections to everything I read over my entire life. I have a hyper-stimulated brain. And so because of that, I have spent and invested 3,000 hours of my personal time. I have not charged a single person a single penny. And now we are coming very close. We have 18 federal cases that I'm consulting on, and it's going to the Supreme Court. And we have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that all of the COVID-19 mandates were unlawful, specifically because they involved biomedical experimental products that were not approved for their with a license indication according to their labeling. So I'm asking you to financially support my efforts. I believe with my whole heart that if I took this leap of faith to fight on behalf of the American people, that all of you would financially support me. I have to take care of my family. I have bills to pay, but these type of activities require nonstop effort. This is not something you spend 5 hours a week on. It's a full-time effort. And so I'm asking you to go to covidpenalty.com. You'll see a button to my Give, Send, Go page where you can support me there. And I want to tell you from the very bottom of my heart that I thank you. No matter, I don't care if you give $5 or $5,000, it all adds up to a successful conclusion. And listen, I promise you, I'm going to fight for you with my whole heart in Congress and in courts. And we are going to have this rule vacated. We're going to restore back to us that which the FDA has stolen, which is our fundamental rights to refuse unapproved medical treatments, unapproved clinical investigations, our right to determine what will happen to our own body, and that the FDA cannot just strip us of those rights and hand it off to a pharmaceutical company for their own profit-making purposes. We will have our right to say no when this is all said and done. So I want to thank you. And listen, I'm not an organization. A lot of people ask me to start one. I'm not. I'm telling you straight up, I don't want to be an organization. This is not my cup of tea. This is a rabbit trail and a journey in life I never saw coming. However, I have a strong passion to see it through to the end. And once it's done, I'm going to go back to my regularly scheduled programming. There are a lot of really great organizations who already cover this field of interest, and they're doing a phenomenal job. So with that, thank you for taking a few minutes out of your time listening to this. Follow me on X at God's Riddles. Follow me at COVID Penalty, and you'll be able to follow the updates on this case as well as all the other work that I'm involved in. God bless you. Thank you, and I'll see you soon.